Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about the franchise tag deadline and our reaction to all the players that got tagged.
Hike!
Joe, let's start off with wide receiver Tee Higgins. He got the franchise tag for the Cincinnati Bengals for $21.8 million. There was much speculation as to what was going to happen with Tee Higgins as a free agent. They've got some, big contracts to come, like Jamar Chase, for example. So, what if it sounds like, Higgins is going to stay on the tag, or do you think this is not the how this is going to end?
Yeah, I'm interested to see if he ends up staying. I think I think he could be a decent tag and trade candidate here. As you mentioned, they do have Jamar Chase coming up, which is more money they got to pay out. This is a really deep wide receiver draft class. Just wonder if they might try to do a tag and trade and potentially replace him.
Do you think in that scenario, what do you think they could get in return for a Tee Higgins tag and trade? Like a second round pick, a first round pick? What do you think his value's at?
Yeah, I don't know if they get a first. I'd be kind of surprised if they could get a first, but I think they could definitely get a second for Tee Higgins.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they can get a second, and I'm on the fence as far as what can happen. I mean, from a team composition standpoint, you would think it doesn't make sense for him to stay long term. So I would think that tagging and trading him to try to retain as much value as possible for losing him makes sense. But you got to remember, had he not been tagged and he left, I would think that the type of caliber player he is, he could possibly be a third-round conditional pick type of player. So in my view, that means that the Bengals are going to have to get at least a third-round pick or above in order for this move to make any sense. At least a second or a third. First, obviously, would be the dream for them, but an early third or a second is in my view, required, or else it really doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just don't see them reaching a long-term deal by the cutoff in July, and then I really am not sure if he's gonna. We've seen players do the holdout; they don't really like signing the franchise tag, so I'm not sure how likely it is for him to sign it and play on the tag this year either.
So, from a fantasy football perspective, what's your sense of Tee Higgins' value? Do you feel that him playing on the tag, there's obviously more uncertainty for his future from a dynasty perspective? So I guess where are you at as far as Tee Higgins? Is he a buy? Is he a sell? Is he a hold? And where do you stand?
Yeah, I think maybe I think I'd be willing to buy Tee Higgins. He was kind of disappointing last year. If he does play on the tag, he's gonna. I mean, contract year. We all know, guys trying to put their best foot forward in their contract year because they're trying to get the money. So I think he could have a pretty good production if he does go on and play on the tag. And then if he gets traded or plays elsewhere, he could have a larger role and be even more fantasy relevant. So I think I'd buy low on the fact that he had an injury-riddled season last year and didn't perform up to standards.
I think I probably would hold him because at this point, I don't know how much of a benefit will be for the Tee Higgins owner to kind of keep him in this limbo state because there's that anticipation, there's that unknown. Is he going to go somewhere else? What does that mean for him? And because there's so many questions, there's some players where I would say like, oh yeah, like if they go somewhere better, then you're going to want them. But it's like, could it get much better than Joe Burrow with the Cincinnati Bengals? Like, I just don't know where he could end up going. Like if he's like, I'm going to go to I don't know, Tennessee Titans, to me, I would be a lot less excited about him, even with his former offensive coordinator being the head coach.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's even though it's a downgrading quarterback, I would think that his target share would go up though, and I think that would be the intriguing part. And we've seen Tee Higgins be able to operate as a one like in place of a Jamar Chase when he was hurt. I know that was Joe Burrow at quarterback, but maybe Will Levis in his sophomore year takes another step and can do something with Tee Higgins if he does happen to go there.
It's possible. Let's talk about another guy who was traded earlier on here, and that's quarterback L'Jarius Sneed, a $19.8 million tag for the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs. There is pretty strong rumors that Chiefs are very much exploring a tag and trade here, which, honestly isn't very often that you see a tag and trade in the NFL. But I believe they even have told Sneed and his camp that he can explore trade options. So it sounds like he could be on the way out. What do you make of everything going on with Sneed?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they're like encouraging the tag and trade option. Obviously, we saw them lastly do this with D Ford, and it worked out really well for the Chiefs. But he's just been such a great lockdown corner for them, and him paired with Trump McDuffie, I mean, it's just been a lethal combination. I mean, I think at least in the regular season, L'Jarius Sneed hadn't even allowed a touchdown, I think, until the playoffs against the Bills, I believe, is when he allowed the first touchdown of the year, which is just crazy. So, I mean, he's been really a fantastic player with them. I think it would really hurt the Chiefs if he does leave, but, we've seen this organization do the tag and trade before, so it wouldn't surprise me if they end up getting something done because there's going to be plenty of teams that are going to be interested in his services.
In my view, from an IDP standpoint, if you have corners in your league, as far as starters go, I'm nervous for him. I think he's done really well in Kansas City in that Steve Spagnuolo defense. I don't know if I feel the same if he just goes to any other team. So to me, I don't know if he'll be as successful if he goes somewhere else. For the Chiefs, they found him in the later rounds. He came out of, he performed very well for them. So they probably can find somebody else. But I don't think he's necessarily irreplaceable, but I also don't think he's replaceable as much either. Like, I think that he's a really good player, and it's not going to be really easy to replace him, but I think he can be. It's just going to be tough. But as far as he goes, depending on, what team gives him how much money, I just don't think it's going to be worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, with an IDP standpoint, if he doesn't go to another team that has like a good lockdown corner or somebody that's got a really good, defensive line that can pressure the quarterback, I'm definitely concerned for him as far as IDP goes. Like you said, if you do play with corners.
Let's talk about wide receiver Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. Got the franchise tag for $21.8 million. The last time they used the franchise tag was for punter Pat McAfee, so it was quite a long time ago for those Indianapolis Colts. Joe, this is an interesting one. We had thought that, I guess we just didn't know. We didn't know if the Colts would be able to land him on a deal or not. Ultimately, they decided to do the tag. And what makes this interesting is this wide receiver class that was going to be going into free agency that was looking pretty interesting has now kind of vanished. Now you've got Pittman as a tag, Higgins as a tag, Mike Evans signs. It's like, boy, the options are starting to go away here.
Yeah, definitely has. And I mean, it really started with Mike Evans, re-signing and staying with the Bucs and him coming off of the board. But as far as Michael Pittman goes, I think there is a chance that the Colts are able to get that long-term deal done by the July deadline. I think they were close and really trying to do it, reach a long-term deal, before they had to put the franchise tag on him. Ultimately, just couldn't get anything to work, so they had to franchise tag him. So I don't see him really getting the franchise tag and then traded. I think there's a good chance they get a deal done.
I do think that it's interesting, though, that we really didn't see him play with Anthony Richardson for all that long. So we don't really know, are they compatible with one another? Can they support each other's playing styles? I recognize he did very well with Gardner Minshew, but he's not your franchise quarterback.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I mean, you're not wrong. A lot of the fantasy value for Michael Pittman came with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, but I got to think that since the Colts were talking about it and trying to work out a long-term deal, that they have confidence that Anthony Richardson, can support Michael Pittman.
At the end of the day, buy, sell, hold for Pittman. Or buy, sell, sold. See, you know where I stand. I would sell him. I've already sold him yesterday. But what about you?
I think I agree. I think I'd go the sell route. Like you said, I'm not sure. There's a lot of questions, right? The rapport with Anthony Richardson is definitely there. He didn't play that many games. Can Anthony Richardson support him? He's also a mobile guy that likes to run a lot. And it's a team that frankly likes to run the ball as well. And then, this whole song and dance if they don't get a long-term deal done and he goes to the franchise tag. Where is he going to be going? I think there's a lot of questions in the air. He had a productive enough season where I think you could get a decent amount of value.
So ultimately, and we're going to be talking about the rest are defensive guys, which just goes to show it seems like offense. These offensive guys don't even they're not in this predicament. I'll put it that way. It just seems like the defensive guys, they end up being in these situations. But at the end of the day, I mean, because of that salary cap increase, which we didn't know what to expect, but it went a lot higher than we thought it would go. If I count it right, I think there's 9 players with a transition tag on top of it, including that tag. So that's a lot of players that got tagged, which ultimately we didn't think there would be that many. But then it goes to show because of that salary cap increase, it did happen. So let's talk about some defensive players. First off, defensive end Josh Allen had a breakout year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's getting a $24 million franchise tag as a defensive end. What do you make of this move for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Earlier, they were releasing the likes of safety Rayshawn Jenkins, cornerback Darius Williams to try to be able to make the room for him. I wonder as a result, will they be able to keep Calvin Ridley or not as a result? And can they sign Josh Allen to a long-term deal?
Yeah, I definitely think they want to get Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley signed. I truly believe that, but I think it'd be interesting to see if they prioritize one or the other. I would imagine that they prioritize Josh Allen. We keep talking about this wide receiver draft class. Like, if they let Calvin Ridley walk, I mean, they can replace him with a rookie in this draft. So, I think they should focus on getting the long-term deal done. And since they did, release the 2 safeties, like you mentioned, and cleared up the cap space, it seems like they're going to really work towards that long-term deal with them.
Well, and it's not like Ridley really had that great of a connection with Trevor Lawrence anyways. People were expecting this huge year for him, and he was a massive disappointment.
Yeah. I mean, plus in the fact that Ridley, really needed Zay Jones to be on the field because, he needed to kind of win from that slot and not so much on the outside.
Next one we got here is defensive end Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers, $24 million as well for the franchise tag number. Was a little surprised by this one because we had heard that the Panthers had stopped negotiating with Brian Burns, and I kind of wondered if they just let him hit the market. There was that trade that we heard about that the Rams would have traded 2 first-round picks for him, and they decided not to. Seems like a puzzling situation. I recognize it's a different front office, but I just feel like they're not really they're doing a disservice to him and the organization, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how they didn't take that deal. To get that for an edge rusher, and for an organization that it's not like they were right on the border of competing either. They're kind of in a rebuild process. Like, why not take that deal and take the picks from the Rams? But that being said, I'd be really surprised if Brian Burns at the end of this is still a Carolina Panther. I don't think I don't think he'll want to sign the franchise tag to stay there. And I think they could ultimately, trade him. I think they might have tagged him in order to trade him so they don't just kind of lose out on him for nothing.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about tags and trades, but I can't remember all that being popular. I mean, you think multiple could happen? Or do you think that's just a changing of the guard? I mean, obviously, even in general, like trades at the deadline kind of were like a nothing burger, nothing would happen, but things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying they could happen. I don't know if I expect them to happen, but I mean, even if he doesn't get traded, I think it's more unlikely that he just holds out and doesn't sign the franchise tag and maybe just forces the Panthers' hands to kind of let him go.
Let's talk about one of your favorite players, Joe, this past season. That's defensive tackle Justin Madubuike, getting the franchise tag for defensive tackles at $22.1 million. This guy had a breakout year, but I got to be honest, I don't necessarily blame the Ravens in making this move because really he came out of nowhere and had this unbelievable year. And the question is it an anomaly, or is it, or is he going to continue to build off this success?
Yeah, I mean, from an IDP standpoint, I hope that he either signs his tag or is still playing with the Ravens because I think it's an ideal spot for him, and I think with the Ravens, he can continue to build on that performance from last year. So, I'm hoping that they either reach a long-term deal or he just plays on the tag again. And we already seen what the guy does when it's a contract year. He absolutely balled out. So hopefully that happens again if he does stay a Raven.
The only other team I may consider is if he were to go to Seattle, only because he played
Mike
so
Macdonald.
well under Mike Macdonald. Yeah, that would make me feel okay about it. But I'm with you. I would much rather, from his statistical point of view and from an IDP standpoint, much rather him be a Baltimore Raven. I think they'll probably get it done. Usually Baltimore. I'm trying to remember over the years, but it doesn't usually get very. I guess it got ugly with Lamar. What am I saying? Yeah. They got pretty ugly, but at the end of the day, they still signed him.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like they really, they're not big players in the free agent market. They really try to. I feel like they
Never
really,
have been.
Build in the draft and kind of retain their own guys. So I think there's a good chance that, maybe he gets a long-term deal done like they did with Lamar Jackson.
Next player we're going to be talking about here is cornerback Jaylon Johnson. Got a franchise tag of $19.8 million. This is a guy who was under much speculation as to whether or not he would get traded at the deadline. Rumor was that the Bears were, pretty adamant that they'd like to keep him, and now they put their money where their mouth is, decided to give him the franchise tag because they don't want to lose him.
Yeah, they have a lot of cap space, so they definitely can sign him. I guess I'd be interested to see if he decides to sign it. If they can't get a long-term deal done.
Yeah, my thing with him is that this was a one-year wonder that he played really well. But besides that, he was not really that good of a player. So I would want him to stay in Chicago from an IDP standpoint because of what he did with Matt Eberflus. I don't know if he would continue his success elsewhere. He's a tough one for me in general.
I agree with you. From an IDP standpoint, if you play with corners, I want him to stay in Chicago with Eberflus, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon in that secondary. They're going to make improvements along that defensive line to get pressure on the quarterback as well. So I hope he does stay in Chicago.
Next, we got safety Antoine Winfield, who also had a career year this year, Joe, with a fantastic season. Has a $17.1 million franchise tag hit now. And that they wanted to keep him after the Mike Evans signing that made the franchise tag possible because ultimately now Baker hits the market. Tough to know with that, but I'm very happy from a Winfield standpoint that he is going to stay with Tampa. Although my concern is I don't know how much longer Todd Bowles is going to be there, and that could change things. He's a tough one. I think, what can he sustain the success he had last year? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he can. He's a young enough safety. Had good pedigree. His dad was a great safety as well. So I think he can keep the play up. I think maybe just something triggered. He also feel like he had less competition in the secondary there, so a lot freed him up to make more plays. I think Baker's going to be back in Tampa Bay. It's just a matter of when, not if. And like you said, that's ultimately why they chose to franchise Antoine Winfield Jr.
Lastly, we've got safety Kyle Duggar. He got the transition tag for $13.8 million. For those of you who don't know what the transition tag is, it basically means that the Patriots have the opportunity to match any contract offer. If they elect not to, then he signs with the other team. But after that offer sheet's signed, they can match that offer. The difference is that they are not going to be able to get any draft compensation in return. For these franchise tag players, if someone were to sign them, they could get 2 first-round picks in return. For Kyle Duggar's situation, they get nothing. So this is kind of an interesting one. I don't know what to make of this move by the Patriots. I find it sort of puzzling because if you let the guy go to the market and you choose to re-sign him, then he comes. If he doesn't, you get a conditional pick, and he's a very high conditional pick. So this one's a little bit of a curious one to me.
Yeah, from an IDP standpoint, I hope that he stays with the Patriots. With Gerard Mayo as coach, I really don't think I think their defensive scheme will pretty much stay the same. He played in that Bill Belichick style of defense when he was a player, so I think he would keep that same philosophy going. And I'm very curious to see what kind of market Kyle Duggar has from these other teams in the NFL. But like I said, from an IDP standpoint, I think it's best if he just stays right there.
Yeah, I wonder, in my view, if I kind of would be curious how he would do somewhere else. I don't know. I wonder if he could be utilized more. Maybe someone I'd be kind of interested to see what his market's like.
Yeah. Is there a certain defense you think he'd fit well in if he does happen to go elsewhere?
Well, to my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, but he's kind of that big nickel type of guy.
Yeah, he's kind of a tweener between corner safety type. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, it would have to be a team who primarily needs that need. But you're not wrong. I mean, from a sustainability standpoint, he's been in that system, so I'm sure Mayo might have a few things different, but it's going to look pretty similar.
Yeah, and he's been really solid from an IDP scoring standpoint, at least in our league, with the Patriots. So I kind of like that, but I don't know. It'd be maybe it's I guess maybe it's a team like the Eagles, or do the Lions take a shot on him and Duggar becomes their CJ Gardner-Johnson that they thought they were getting last year before he got hurt.
So that does it for our NFL franchise tag reaction. There were a lot of players that we didn't mention that did not get the tag, which are very interesting. Some names come to mind, like defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, safety Xavier McKinney, running back Josh Jacobs, who was tagged last year, running back Tony Pollard, who was tagged last year, running back Saquon Barkley, that was tagged last year. So it'll be a very exciting free agency. It's hard to believe that we're almost there. We only got a couple of days to go. But Joe and I are excited, as we're going to be talking our free agency preview coming up, and then throughout free agency, we'll be giving you our reactions. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.